Keeping children safe online is a concern for every parent. Children can have a technical skill that is far more advanced than their cognitive development, and it's not easy to know how or what boundaries to set. Today's guest is Susan McLean. Susan is Australia's foremost expert in the area of cyber safety and was a member of Victoria Police for 27 years. Widely known as the Cyber Cop, she was the first Victoria police officer appointed to a position involving cyber safety and young people. In 2003, she was the Victoria Police Region 4 Youth Officer of the Year. She has also been awarded the National Medal and Victoria Police Service Medal and the second clasp, the National Police Medal. Susan established a consulting firm in March 2007 called Cyber Safety Solution and has grown to be the most highly respected and in-demand cyber safety consultancy in Australia. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. Susan, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey Podcast today.
It's my pleasure, and hi to everyone listening, no matter where you are in the world. My name's Susan McLean. I'm delighted to have been invited to join the podcast today to talk about something that I'm passionate about, and that's all things online safety and young people. So my background is in law enforcement. I was a police officer in Melbourne for 27 years, and I took my first report of cyberbullying in 1994. So I've been dealing with the internet for 26 years. I predate Google, which the kids in school think is hysterical because was there a world before Google? But there was listservs, bulletin boards, and chat rooms, and that was about it. So when I took that first report of cyberbullying, I was quite surprised. Victoria Police at that point were not connected to the internet. So there was no internet connection at work. I certainly had the internet at home, didn't really use it because there was no reason to use it. It wasn't like it is now. But it sparked an interest in that if young people had already worked out how to misuse it, and I was still struggling to use it, then there's going to be a disconnect. And we know that young people certainly were the early adopters of social use of technology. So I started to do some research and training and looking at where I could go to be skilled in this. And it led me to America. I connected with a fabulous ex-law enforcement guy called Brad Russ. He's from the University of New Hampshire. And I came over to America. I came to Rochester in upstate New York, and I did some training over there. So this is the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force Team training that is provided for law enforcement in the States and FBI. So I did that training. Then I went down to Dallas, Texas, because Dallas hosts the best child safety conference in the world. I've been to that many times now. So did my training there, then came back to Australia. I was the first police officer in Victoria given a position looking at safety in young people. So up until then, police had focused on the child exploitation angle, certainly not to the successful degree that they do now, but that's really the only area of kids being online that they were looking at. So I was allowed to establish a project team. We conducted 12 months of research that looked at the issue from all different angles, and then provided recommendations to Victoria Police about what they should be doing moving forward. I really wanted them to develop something similar to the ICAC program because that to me was fabulous. It was relatively new when I first went to the States, and now it's been evaluated, and of course it's everywhere. But the thing I liked about that was that it was holistic. It was a one-stop shop, and you didn't have to have victims traipsing to all different places, talking to all different people when something traumatic had occurred. So did that. Unfortunately, the police officer that was supporting my initiatives retired. So I lost the internal support that I had, and then it became quite toxic in that this was my passion and I was being stamped on or stomped on at every turn. I had high-ranking police officers say to me, you have invented cyberbullying to create a job opportunity for yourself. My kids never heard about it. It doesn't exist. But the best one was that you're blonde and female and you don't have much going for you. So that's the issue with working in a hierarchical, male-dominated organization. So that's fine. I put up with it for a while, and then I started to realize that, no, this was a concern. And for me, I still like to catch the bad guy, don't get me wrong. But if I'm catching a bad guy, where the child is a victim, then it means the child's been harmed. So I work the other way. I don't want the kid harmed, so there's no arrest. So I took a leap of faith. I quit one day. I just walked in and said, that's it, I'm going. Had no plan, no nothing. But I had a passion, and I knew that there was a need for this. And I established my own consultancy 11 years ago now. But that's now grown to be the most in-demand and highly regarded cyber safety consultancy in Australia. As I mentioned earlier when we were chatting, I've been invited to speak in American schools. The BBC flew me over to the UK to present at one of their conferences. I speak internationally every year other than a COVID year, of course. So I love what I do. I work probably 80% of my time in schools, with teachers, parents, and students. But I also work in Australia with elite sports. So I work with our Australian rules football, Australian test cricketers, and then I do elite tennis players, swimmers, netballers. I write policy now. I write resources for education departments. I do a whole lot of stuff, and I do a lot of media. I'm often asked to comment on stories in the media. I've got a very good working relationship with the main tech companies in the States, so I get updated about changes to their platforms, and I can certainly reach out to them if I need assistance with a serious case. And then, of course, I still help families report serious cyberbullying and child exploitation matters to police.
So have you seen a significant shift in law enforcement's belief and willingness to treat online and cyber issues with the seriousness that they do in-person physical crimes?
Yeah, it's certainly improved out of sight. When in the early days when I started this journey, like all police in Australia, each state police have a sex crimes unit, and that was predominantly to deal with physical sexual assaults. What they used to do is if you were investigating some online sexual sort of stuff, if there was a real life case, you had to leave your online investigation and deal with the in-life one because that was considered more serious. So certainly multiple things have happened over the years. And it was one of the things that Brad Russ was really keen to do, was to try to get some sort of national cooperation to get people trained up. Because, you know, if you're not trained, then you can't respond. I was also very lucky. I did the university course from the University of Central Lancashire in the United Kingdom. There's only 2 people in Australia that have done that. And I've done other bits and pieces as well. But the things that have changed is this, and this is what I see regularly. There is clearly an acknowledgement that cyberbullying and online harms exist, and they're significant. There is sadly still, though, a lack of training for frontline police officers. So if you get to the specialists, which you can't get to if you're Mrs. Citizen knocking on the counter, you're fine. But there is still a clear barrier right around Australia with people going in to report online crimes, being victim blamed. What did you expect? You're on Twitter, or just shut your account down, that'll fix the problem. We're getting better. And it's a bit like, I call it postcode lottery. So you might take your complaint to one police station and it's done well, another it's not. Where we have kicked goals in Australia is the international cooperation. And that is now phenomenal. And there's not a week goes by that we don't have an arrest here where either the victim or the offender is not in Australia. And what we've established recently over the last 18 months is they're called JACET teams, JACET, Joint Anti-Child Exploitation Teams. They're made up of our federal police and our state police working together. They're not as comprehensive as ICAC, so they don't have interviewers and they don't have the medical staff and the psychologists and all of that. But it's state and federal police working together. And that then means that all those international connections, so everything that comes out of NECMEC in the States comes through to our federal police here. And then it used to be sort of divvied out and it was a bit hit and miss. So now we've got this fabulous approach. And, you know, the amount of arrests are phenomenal. But I would much rather there was no arrest because we could educate young people not to fall victim to these types of crimes.
Yeah. That's definitely what you want to see, is the prevention happening, as opposed to, not that you don't want people convicted and charged, but you definitely, if you can get people from never becoming the victim in the first place, it goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Do you see more cross-border versus where you have a victim and a perpetrator in different countries, or is it more domestic where both the victim and the perpetrator are in the same country?
Yeah. I would say in Australia, it's within Australia would be the majority of the types of behaviours or the types of criminality. But because if you think, the international criminal gangs that are working in the area of sextortion, the international child exploitation gangs, I mean, that's where you've got, Australia becomes a tiny piece of the puzzle where, we're part of an investigation that the FBI is doing. So you've got, hundreds of arrests in the States. You've got hundreds of arrests throughout Europe, hundreds in Australia. So for the very high level stuff, like the big international rings, obviously a lot of the offenders are not in Australia. But certainly what has changed for me is the large number of Australians now that are involved in these international child exploitation gangs. And the other one is if we talk about the webcam abuse, where you might be watching, historically those victims were in poverty in third world countries. They weren't average Aussie kids or average American kids. They were really highly at risk. But that is a shift that I've seen, that we've got, average kids that have been sucked in to performing on a webcam. So, as well as educating young people, we've got to get to their parents. Their parents are the gatekeepers to their online safety. So they've got to make sure that gate is locked as much as it can be.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the different kinds of activities that you're seeing. You talked about cyberbullying and harassment and child exploitation, sextortion. Some of those obviously overlap in different ways. Are there other kind of big areas that we should be talking about today in addition to those?
Well, I think in Australia, our statistics are close to a quarter of all teens have been cyberbullied at some point. The cyberbullying does take many forms. It can be abusive messages, nasty messages. It can be humiliation. It can be exclusion. So cyberbullying, and we also know that it is nearly always an extension to schoolyard bullying. So it's starting in the schoolyard and it's continuing online. We see a lot of the sexual abuse stuff, so that by volume, I would put that below the cyberbullying. The other thing that we deal with a lot in Australia, and I'm sure you do in the States as well, is the sharing of nude images. So call it sexting, call it sending a nude, naked selfie. And of course, that is very problematic in most places because it fits the legal definition of what is child exploitation material. Mm-hmm. So here we have adolescents without a fully formed brain making an impulsive decision, but being charged with child exploitation offences, which is clearly not what the law was written for. And not that I ever advocate go for your life and share these photos. What we have to make sure is the laws are fit for purpose. And we should not be criminalising teens unless they are acting with criminal intent. And some teens do. Like, don't get me wrong, I deal with teens that are vindictive and do share nudes widely that they shouldn't have. So I'm not fussed about them. But the consensual sharing of nude images that, for whatever reason, falls into the police's hands, we need to do better when it comes to dealing with those people, those children.
Gotcha. So when you initially talked and said, parents are the gatekeepers. So let's talk about what parents should be watching for and what they should be doing.
Yeah. So for parents, it's really important that you understand that to be an effective parent in the 21st century, you have to parent in the digital space. But it's no different. You have rules and boundaries in real life. You have rules and boundaries online. You know where your child is going in real life. You know where they're going online. So it all equates nicely. But there's this, I think, fear about, oh my goodness, I can't do that because I don't understand that. You don't need to understand it. You understand right and wrong. You understand risk and danger. That's really all you need. And you have to be prepared to say no. That's the key, because what I get to deal with is the child that is sooked and whinged because everyone else is allowed to do X. Mum and dad give in, and then we end up with a mess. And so parents need to be aware that, the internet is 100% an adult world. It is an adult world you are putting your child into. So can you remove the risk? Absolutely not. You can't remove the risk. But what you can do is to educate yourself to be able to identify the risk and then, of course, minimize and manage the risk in the best possible way. So that is saying no. That is saying, well, hang on a minute, you're 10. You have to be 13 to have Instagram. You're not having it. We'll talk about this in 3 years' time. It is about being strong because young people's technical skill far outweighs their cognitive and brain development. So they have this massive gap in what they can actually do and what they have the capacity to understand.
I like that. A technical skill outweighs their cognitive skill.
Development, yeah.
Cognitive development. That's a good perspective. I think lots of parents are like, well, they understand the technology, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, or parents say, they know more than me. My kid knows more than me. Well, yes, except that your child does know more than you about how to put fingers on a device and do something. But that's all they know. Their brain's not fully formed. They don't have life experiences nor maturity. They're adolescents. They're impulsive, compulsive. They can't understand risk. They can't perceive risk. So that becomes, the perfect storm for something to go terribly wrong.
So what are some of the rules and boundaries that parents should be putting in place? Obviously, if your kid's 10 and Instagram's terms and conditions say you have to be 13, obviously we don't want to be violating that, but should parents just automatically be going, well, you're 13, you're on Instagram, do whatever you want?
No. So what I always say to parents is, obviously, if your child is under 13, you should be in control of everything they're doing. So they shouldn't be allowed to download apps, and they shouldn't have, it all should go through a family, the family sharing account on Apple or the Google Play account where mum and dad are in control. So we want you to know what your child might be exposed to, where they're going, so that you can go, well, hang on a minute, you've asked to download this app. I've had a look at it. It's totally inappropriate. Common sense media says avoid at all costs. We're not going to go there. And then, of course, the one thing you're going to check is the age. So up until the age of the platform, the conversation can simply be, I've checked it out. The platform's rules state you can't be there. As a family, we don't lie. We don't break rules. It's a no. There are, of course, mature 13-year-olds and immature 19-year-olds. So it doesn't mean that the day they turn 13, they can log onto these platforms. That's when the conversation can start about whether or not the platform is suitable for what you want your child exposed to. And what I always say to parents is start with one. Start with one that you can manage. And then, of course, the best predictor of your child's future behavior is past behavior. So if you have a kid that lurches from poor decision to poor decision, easily led, then you're going to err on the side of, well, perhaps no. If you've got a child that routinely makes good choices, you can sort of go, yes. But remembering, good kids can make a poor choice. So don't ever think, I can trust my kid, they're fine. Because especially when it comes to peer pressure, when it comes to sexual exploitation, the people peddling this are far cleverer than your kid will ever be, unfortunately. So it is about being there with them, being an active participant in their online life.
And so how active does that mean? Is that constantly looking over their shoulder, watching every swipe and key click, or? No,
because if you do that, you will give yourself a stomach ulcer. You will give yourself eye strain. No, I always call it like a watching brief. And again, I want you to know your kids' passcodes and passwords. I want you to get into their accounts in case of emergency. I certainly don't want you reading every keystroke. I think that's stupid. There has to be a level of trust, but trust has to be earned. So what I always advocate is, you can have a rule that, 4 times per month or, twice a month, I'm going to check your device. Now, it's not the same day every month because you don't want the kid, knowing when this might happen. But it's basically getting in, scrolling, making sure there's nothing untoward there, moving on, not reading everything. And as I say to the kids, there's a big difference to stuff that perhaps you don't want mum to see because you're talking about the hot boy at school, to stuff that is, illegal and criminal and highly inappropriate. So if it's that second thing, it shouldn't be on the internet in the first place. So, the last person you should be worrying about finding it is mum. It's out there for the rest of the world. But it's about knowing your child. It is about being the world's best expert on your own child. so that you can notice subtle changes in their behavior, in their demeanor, in their friendship group, in their academic progress, and investigate that, because historically, you didn't have to factor internet issues into those sort of changes. Some of them are purely just adolescent changes. Some of them are because your child failed a test and they didn't, put in well enough and they're beating themselves up. And then sometimes it's because of an online issue. So, my advice to parents is trust your instincts. You are the adult. And if something bothers you in any way, shape, or form, investigate. It may turn out to be nothing, but it may turn out to be something. And the earlier you can jump on online issues, the better the outcome for everyone.
So would that include, like, on any type of the social media accounts, looking at who their friends are and seeing, do you know this other child, and asking them, hey, I don't know this Robert. Is he from your school? Like, what are the red flags there?
Yeah, so I always say that regularly they need to check their children's lists. So game list, contact list, phone list, chat list, whatever list, you can find someone on. And the people on that list, the child has to explain that to your satisfaction, not to the kid's satisfaction. Oh, Mum, yes, Robert. Yeah, oh, yes, Robert. He's the guy I met on holidays, brother's best mate's cousin's neighbour. He's awesome. Never met him, but hey, so my advice is, if you can't invite this person home for dinner, gone, all right? Because I get to deal with lots of issues around friends of friends. Who is this person that's harassing you online? I don't know. Why is he on your Insta? Oh, well, I added him. Why did you add him? Oh, because he was Sarah's friend. Sarah, who's Robert? I don't know. I added him because he was Evie's friend. Evie, who's Robert? Oh, I don't know. I added him because he was Tom's friend. Tom, who's Robert? I don't know. So, yes, that is one of the, and what we know is, whilst the cyberbullying issue is usually peer-to-peer, it's not, a random person going to cyberbully your child. The sexual predation side of it is normally the opposite of in real life. So in real life, we know that the majority of people that sexually abuse children are already known to them. Right? They're within the family, the extended family, the neighborhood, the sport club, etc. But online, the majority of these people are not known to the child in real life. So, you can reduce almost 90% of risk if you are making sure that your children are only talking to people that they actually know and trust. So that's about identifying the risk, minimizing and managing it.
And so how do you deal, is that, I guess it's, I often hear of kids saying, well, I'm pretty sure that it's, Sarah's friend or Billy's friend. I think I know who they are. Like, how do you deal with accounts where, it is someone pretending to be another kid?
Yeah. And see, that's what you will never know, because you don't know. I mean, you might accept a friend request of Sally Smith because there is actually a Sally Smith in your class. And then it turns out that it is a fake account. So, there's usually some things about, how many followers they have, who else is on the account. And if you actually know the person, you can always check. You can always say, hey, I added you last night. And then, is this your account? And I know that's sort of, double checking, but often you really need to, because I've dealt with cases where kids have set up Instagram accounts in other kids' names and then use those to solicit nude photos or use those to cyberbully, to deflect blame and to get some other kid in trouble. So it is about, not taking it at face value. And I had this really robust discussion with a grade 6 boy the other day. So in Australia, grade 6 is 11, 12. And he said, yeah, but I know the person I'm talking to is Bill Smith. And I said, but how do you know? And he said, because he told me that was his name. And I said, yeah, but how do you know? And he said, oh, because, well, he's 12 and he looks 12. I said, yeah, but how do you know? How do you know? And he just couldn't, because I think, kids just do, like, oh, there's a adult, there's a kid, why would they lie to me? Kids are inherently trusting. And that's why people that want to harm them have such success.
Yeah. So flipping it around, what do parents of kind of cyberbullying kids do if they find out that their kid is harassing other kids online?
Yeah. And that's a huge shock to find out that your child is bullying other kids on or offline. And what I always say is, much as parents need to protect their children online from the bad stuff, they also need to make sure that their children are not engaging online in a way that is inappropriate. So it is about having the conversations prior about what is acceptable, what is right, what is wrong, just going over and over it again. I always say, talk early, talk often. It's, never too early to start and it's never too late to start, but the earlier you start, the better. And then when you're checking those devices occasionally, if you see your child has been disrespectful online, you need to call it out. If they're being racist or homophobic, you need to call it out. The same as I would expect you to call it out if it was happening in real life. So, your online persona and experience should be a mirror of who and what you are in real life.
Gotcha. And are kind of the same rules apply with the sextortion that you've run across and the child exploitation? Like, now we're talking international and people that are already impoverished and, in difficult situations to begin with.
The ones that are impoverished, it's very hard to educate their way out of it because often they're not in school or they don't have, good they don't have parents or guardians to protect them. So that gatekeeper is gone and it's up to them. And that makes it very difficult. But, if you are caring for a child in any way, shape or form, be aware that there are people out there that want to prey on them. So if we look at opportunity to participate in this sort of criminality or to become a victim, we know that these images and videos are not taken in front of mum and dad. They're not taken in the kitchen. They're not taken, in the family room while we're watching TV. They are always taken in bedrooms and bathrooms. So how do we reduce that risk? We make sure devices with cameras and internet connections are never in bedrooms and bathrooms. And I know it's hard because kid wants to listen to music in the shower. Well, then you rock up to Best Buy and buy a Bluetooth speaker, or they want it's their alarm clock. No, you head up to Target and get an alarm clock. So there's always a way. Kids will have an excuse. You've got to counteract that. But there was a really comprehensive study done in the UK by the Internet Watch Foundation that looked at over 2,000 cases of the webcam sexual abuse. And they found that in over 90% of those cases, they were all filmed in bedrooms and bathrooms. So where mum and dad couldn't see, basically. And then if you expand that rule or you think about it, if you've got a hormonal teenager at home, they're not going to be able to send the nude to their friend at school because the device is not anywhere that this can happen. Now, could they do it in the toilet at school? Of course they could, if the school doesn't have rules about phones and all of that. But remember, we can't remove the risk. It's about reducing it.
Gotcha.
To the best of our ability. So, if there's no way that child can take those nude photos at home, well, it's less likely it's going to happen because there's limited places in public that they can do it.
Yeah, you're never going to be entirely able to eliminate risk, but it's a matter of reducing it. And
to the best of your ability. And the thing I say to parents, and I get these parents all the time, if only, or what if? They knew they should have said no. They knew they should have done more. It was all too hard for a variety of reasons, and I get that. And especially during COVID, life is different and it's difficult. But then they beat themselves up because if only they had taken that device off them at 9:00 at night rather than let them have it all night, we would not be sitting at the police station. So that is the harsh reality.
Is there? You think there's a particular age that it's appropriate for kids to start having their phone, having their own phone, or not having their own phone prior to?
As in owning a phone, if you like using a phone.
Yeah.
Look, I think one of the things some parents do wrong is they give their child a phone believing it's going to keep them safe. Right? So phones are not safety items. They're handy to text you to say that I've missed the bus or sport training's been cancelled or, whatever. They're not going to keep your child safe because by the time, and this is a horrible example, but it's real, someone comes along and wants to grab your child, for example, they're not going to be able to say to that person, oh, can you hang on while I get out my safety phone and text mum? Like, it's not going to happen. So don't give a phone over thinking it's going to keep your child safe. Then I get the argument, oh, but I can track their movements on it. Well, yeah, you can. But if you've got really little kids, you should know where they are anyway. You should need to track them. I call that parenting by remote. So not an advocate for that. Handy is all it is. But in Australia, what we tend to see is children are given, so our schooling system obviously is a little bit different. We just have primary and secondary. So primary is from the very start of school up until the time you're 12, so 7 years of schooling. And then secondary school, we call it year 7 to year 12. Most Australian children will get a phone to start secondary school. For the simple reason is that a lot of them will then start to travel on public transport. to school.
Mm-hmm.
So handy. After school sport will happen and all of those sort of things. There are certainly children in primary schools that have phones. I personally do not see any valid reason for that, because there is none. Basically, if your kid is sick at school, you go to the office and they ring mum and dad. There's not a reason for that. But yeah, that's what we're seeing here around that end of primary school, moving into secondary is when most kids get phones.
And would the same apply to? I mean, I think kind of applies to like laptops in bedrooms and desktops in bedrooms.
It's all devices. It's gaming consoles in bedrooms. There's a whole lot of things. There's the safety issue because you can't adequately supervise in a bedroom. It's impossible. Doesn't matter who you are. Then there are the issues with screen time. And then there are the postural issues and the musculoskeletal issues and the eye issues. And there's a whole lot of things that, need to be addressed. So these sort of devices need to be in common areas of the house, so it becomes part of the family, not some kid in isolation in their bedroom. It never ends well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that in my circle of friends, that the common philosophy is, all electronic devices stay in family areas. They don't go into bedrooms. They don't go into bathrooms. You do your homework in the family room with the other kids doing the homework.
Yeah. And it's tough and it's really hard, especially if you've got, one yappy kid that just wants to disrupt everyone else and the dog's barking, the baby's crying. Like, I get how hard it is, but you've got to look at the alternative. And the alternative to me, is that I would be putting my child at risk. There is no issue, however, with a laptop going to a bedroom with no internet connection.
Yeah.
Not much fun can happen there. So again, if you've got your house set up where you can turn the Wi-Fi off or you can block it to certain devices, well, then the older child can sit in a bedroom and type an essay. That's not a problem. But it's about looking at, I say to parents, I can't give any parent a template to take a news in their house because everyone is different. Families are different. They're structurally different houses. They're made up of different kids. I know kids that will, hack into a neighbour's network when mum and dad turn their own off. So if you've got, Harry the hacker at home, you're going to have to do better than if you've got, compliant Chris. So it depends.
So, yeah, that's very good. Are there things that like teachers and clergy and kind of peripheral people that are interacting with kids that they should be watching out for to be able to identify kids at risk or that are, falling victim?
So for me, every adult in the world has a responsibility to keep all children safe on and offline. So if you are working in junior sport, if you're working, in a church youth group, if you're doing the dance, you're the dance teacher, the athletics coach, like whatever you are, to me, you have a responsibility. You also should be ensuring that your practices are child safe, so that you're not putting the kids at risk with, putting pictures of them on the internet without consent and all that sort of stuff. So you should be operating under a child safe framework. And in Australia, this is law. So we've got a legal framework that says that all these organisations that work with children legally must exhibit the fact that they're child safe. But then again, it is about educating those sort of people about what abuse looks like, how it might manifest itself. But the most important thing is that open and honest communication, because what we do know is about 80% of kids won't tell a parent or another trusted adult if they're having an online issue because they're fearful of the outcome, even if they've done nothing wrong. So making sure that these key people in children's lives, other than mum, dad, carer, guardian, those kids know that, okay, I'm here to teach you dance or I'm here to teach you baseball. But you know what, buddy, if you've got a problem, you can come to me, that I've got your back. And I think we need to do more of that so that, they might not be able to have prevented something because, they're not with that child in the home environment, but they can certainly act on it because the child feels confident to tell.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Are there resources that people can find online for setting these systems in place and kind of finding frameworks for what is and isn't appropriate for any particular age group?
Yeah, there's a lot of good resources, but like the internet, you've got to wade through them and try to find something that's remotely useful. And if you've got no base knowledge, you're not going to know what you're reading is correct or not because you're coming from really low knowledge. So I refer Australian families to NetMech and NetSmarts. because they have awesome resources and they have lots of games that kids can play. They're playing a computer game, but they're learning an online safety lesson. So NetSmarts and NECMEC do good stuff there. I also, in Australia, we're the only country in the world that has a federal government department devoted to online safety and young people, the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner. Now, all those resources are available worldwide. The only thing that Americans can't utilize is the reporting function. The same as I can report to NECMEC, but, any localized reporting thing I couldn't report in the States because I'm not a local. So the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner has some fabulous resources. It has a parents portal, an educators portal. It also has kids and teens, so a good resource there. I also like another one of yours, Common Sense Media, which they do, great reviews of apps and platforms and look at, is it safe, is it dangerous? The Family Online Safety Institute, FOSI, another one of your people. Stephen Balcom does amazing work there. And the other place, if you're a parent or an educator and you want really good research, the Cyberbullying Research Center, which is at the University of Florida, in partnership with, I'm not sure which universities, but it's in Wisconsin. So Justin Patchen and Samir Hujinder, and I've probably said that wrong, two fabulous researchers in the space of cyberbullying, and they pump stuff out all the time. So if you want up-to-date, current and relevant stuff, I'd be hitting them up as well. And you can follow them online. You can sign up for their emails. I know you've just had Cyberbullying Month in the States. Samir was pumping fact sheets out every day for 30 days. Really, really, really good stuff. I have a website, so I've got information on it. Again, other than the bit about laws and legislation, which are different here, all the other content is absolutely relevant to what you're seeing over there. And on my Facebook page, Susan McLean, Cyber Safety Expert, there's a whole series of educational videos that I produced in March to help, and they're all there for free to help people learn about all the different topics. So, use those as trusted resources. Be mindful of where you get your information. Just like anything, when you Google something, option number one isn't always the best.
Yep, that's definitely true. What is your website? You referred to it, but you didn't tell us what it is.
Okay, so the website is www.cybersafetysolutions, so with an S on the end of solutions.com.au. And on my website as well, the videos are there, fact sheets are there, my contact details are there, but you can also purchase my books through my website. My books are available. One book was published by Penguin, so it is actually available worldwide, and you can buy it on Booktopia and all of those, on Amazon and all the online platforms. It's called Sex, Texts and Selfies. And it's about 60,000 words, all about how to keep children safe in the digital space. So again, the only part of that book that's not relevant to the States, and I've sold a ton of copies over there, is the bit about laws and legislation, because that's different. But everything else is 100% accurate for your listeners.
That's awesome. And it's definitely important for parents to know what the laws are in your locality. It's going to vary from country to country, potentially significantly.
Yeah, but your problem is you vary across the country. Like, you don't have much consistency at all. It's a nightmare because, there's this law here and it's there, but it's not used there, and it's here and it's not there. And then it's, free speech here, but it's not there. So, yeah, it is very tricky. But one thing that you do have that is consistent is the child exploitation stuff. So that is stock standard everywhere. What becomes a little bit grey is cyberbullying. Some states have run with really good laws over in America. Others haven't. So,
yeah, my experience in talking with people who have come to me talking about cyberbullying is they've gotten particularly poor responses from local police departments. It's kind of like what you said. Well, just shut your account down, just block them. Yeah, we have more important things to deal with, which is unfortunate circumstance.
It is really sad. A lot of that is lack of knowledge. Like, we've got clear laws here and we still have lack of knowledge. So I think, I know the curriculum, and when you go to the police academy, it's really crowded. I don't think yet they do enough. And what my argument is always this, frontline police need to be au fait with online crimes because there is an online component to a lot of stuff. Obviously, cyberbullying. We have a huge issue here with domestic and family violence being conducted online, so victims being harassed and stalked online. The burglar that goes into your house to steal stuff, where's he going to sell it? Online on eBay or Gumtree or Craigslist or something like that. So, you need to have, the graffiti artists, the dumb ones, they film themselves committing the crime and then upload it to YouTube. So, it's everywhere when it comes to any form of criminality. So they should be trying to get on top of it better.
Yep, it's definitely a challenge. Susan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your background with our audience. Super appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And take care over there. I know you're moving into winter and all of that, but there'll be light at the end of the tunnel. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Prey podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a review by visiting easyprey.com/review. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Susan McLean can be found at easyprey.com/48.